Today, the gospel speaks about Judas. Judas went to the chief priests and asked them, "What will you give to me if I hand Jesus over to you?" It's not that the chief priest came to him and said, "Hey, can you help us?" Judas went to the chief priest and said, "What would you give to me if I hand him over to you?" And they said, "We will give you 30 pieces of silver." Lot of money. The reason why Jesus had to be handed over is Jesus was in Jerusalem. There were millions and millions of people. Jesus was very popular. He was teaching. There were crowds. It was very hard for the Jewish authorities to arrest him during the day. But in the night, Jesus was mostly alone with his disciples. Jesus was in prayer. And Judas was one of the core people. He knew. He knew where to find Jesus at night. The question is, what happened to Judas? Why would Judas step up and meet the chief priests, the leaders, the enemies of Jesus, and make an offer? What will you give me? Judas had everything going for him to be an apostle. He had a magnificent heart. That's why Jesus picked him in the first place. He had great promise. He was very gifted. In fact, Jesus would appoint him as in charge of the finances. So what happened to Judas? Well, it's a very difficult question. The most important thing that you and I have to realize is God does not set up anyone for failure. Absolutely not. God does not destine anyone to fail. Sometimes people think he was destined to be the betrayer. No, God does not destine anyone to be a failure. Absolutely not. What happened to Judas? At some point, Judas stopped working on his relationship with Jesus. At some point, he no longer believed in Jesus, in his mission, the type of Messiah that he wanted to be. But then the question is, then why did he stay? I mean, when you don't believe in something, when you don't have a relationship with someone, then why do you stay in that relationship? Why do you still stay in this organization? Well, I think he stayed for multiple reasons. One, for what he could get out of staying there, even though he didn't believe in any of what Jesus was talking about. We get some idea when the woman came into the room and washed Jesus' feet with a very expensive ointment. It was 300 days' wages. I mean, it's very expensive. Judas said, why wasn't that sold and the money given to the poor? Now, John says, Judas said that not because he cared about the poor. He said it because he was a thief. He stole money from the common fund. He was a thief. So probably he stayed on because he could pilfer money out of the common fund. He stayed on probably thinking that he could change Jesus' ideas, his mission being there. I call people who stay in a relationship, in an organization, but you don't believe in its mission, but you do it for your own personal purposes, as a hypocrite. In fact, Judas was probably one of the greatest examples of a slave hypocrite. A hypocrite is one who pretends to have feelings, sentiments, qualities, beliefs that actually they don't have. A hypocrite pretends to have sentiments and feelings that they do not have. That's why in the gospel of today, when Jesus says, one of you is going to betray me, there was so much of distress and sorrow among the disciples. And they said, is it I, Lord? And then Jesus reaches out to Judas, and Judas pretends. And Judas says, surely it's not I. He was a slave hypocrite. He has already made a deal with the chief priest. At that point, he had no feelings, he had no sentiments, he had no love for his master. Absolute hypocrite. Now, Jesus used to call the Pharisees hypocrites. But the Pharisees were good-meaning people. They studied the law, they tried to observe the law. Their downfall, among other things, centered on self-justification and self-importance. It's about themselves. It's about what they could get out of religion. They didn't truly love other people. To some extent, they didn't believe in the very faith that they were promoting. It's about what they could get out of it. It's about their own understanding of who they are. In the Catholic Church today, we have a term for priests and bishops that often possess this quality. We call it clericalism. It's a terrible thing. We have made a religion centered on ourselves. Well, Judas was a hypocrite, a slave hypocrite. He did not love Jesus. He had no feelings. He had no sentiments. He didn't believe in the core mission that Jesus was going to accomplish. But he pretended all through. Money, avarice, desire for material possessions had become much more important than God, than Jesus' core mission to be the Messiah. At some point, the devil maximizes on your weaknesses. And that's why yesterday's passage, Brian talked about, he left that meeting and it was dark. Satan entered into him. Satan took over. He would betray his master for 30 pieces of silver. It's a very sad story. I think you and I have to ask ourselves this important question. Is God the most important person in my life? Do I love God? Do I believe in His mission, in His saving mission, in His unselfish love more than anything else in the world? What is taking more importance in my life than God? than faith, than truth, than relationship. At some point, if we do not continue to work on our relationship with Jesus, at some point when you and I are not sincere, we are hypocrites. We are just pretending. We are staying in a relationship. We are staying in a church. We are staying in our faith because it's all about us. Then our weakness becomes the greatest challenge. As we enter into the Holy Week, that's our prayer. That our love for Jesus is sincere. To make our relationship with God pure from within. That's our prayer for you and for me. The 3 days that we are going to enter into, Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, we are going to rise above ourselves, our own self-justification, our own self-importance, or as we praise words, a clericalism, into making God the most important person, making the needs of other people more important than my own. Love of God and love of neighbor. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.